Good morning everyone. Myself is Kiran Mai, a lecturer in physics working at Government City College. Today, now we are going to discuss about low temperature physics. For that, first of all, we'll take the phase change or first order. We have studied the term change of state, which means change in the thermodynamic state variables such as pressure, volume, and temperature. In thermodynamics, we use the word change of phase for transitions of matter. The term phase is equilibrium condition of a homogeneous substance. For example, ice, water, and steam are the phases of three phases of a single substance. So, the phases are the various states in which a material can exist. A first order phase change is one which is accompanied by the emission or absorption of heat without any change in temperature. For example, consider the first order phase transition in a given mass of water. When water is heated at constant pressure, the temperature increases uniformly and heat absorbed increases the internal energy of water. At boiling point, the internal energy absorbed changes the phase of water into gaseous phase. The amount of energy supplied to convert water into steam at the boiling point is called specific latent heat of vaporization. Similarly, when a given mass of water is cooled, its internal energy decreases uniformly till freezing point. After giving out the internal energy as specific latent heat of fusion, the water is converted into solid phase called ice. Now, each substance there is a set of temperature and pressure at which any of the two states of three may exist in equilibrium. We consider the following case: liquid vapor curve. For this curve, we consider an enclosure filled with liquid and its saturated vapor. The vapor pressure of saturated vapor depends upon the temperature alone. This increases with the increasing the temperature. This is shown by OA, known as curve of vaporization. The substance above OA is liquid while below OA is in vapor state. Fusion curve. The solid may coexist in equilibrium with the liquid. The pressure temperature curve in this case is known as a fusion curve. In figure, this is denoted by OB. To the left of the curve, the substance exists in solid and towards right in liquid state. Sublimation curve. The solid may coexist with vapor in equilibrium. The temperature and pressure at which the solid and vapor may exist in equilibrium is shown by curve OC in figure. The curve is known as sublimation curve. Above OC, the substance is wholly in solid and below it in vapor state. Thus, the pressure of the substance determines the range of temperature for which the substance exists in a given phase. When all the three curves are plotted on the same graph with the same scale, they intersect at point O. The point O is called the triple point. Hence, a triple point may be defined as a point at which the temperature and pressure are such that solid, liquid, and a vapor phase coexist in equilibrium. The corresponding temperature and pressure are called triple point temperature and triple point pressure. Next is Joule-Thomson effect. The principle of Joule-Thomson effect is as shown in figure. PQ is thermally insulated cylinder containing porous plug and fitted with the two non-conducting pistons A and B. The porous plug separates the cylinders into two parts. The gas is compressed to a high temperature P1 on one side. The gas then passes through the porous plug on the other side. There is a constant low pressure P2. When the compressed gas molecules come towards the lower pressure side after passing through the porous plug, they are drawn apart and hence suffer a change in temperature. The change in temperature is called as Joule-Thomson effect. This effect may be stated as follows. When a gas under a constant pressure is passed through a porous plug to a region of lower constant pressure, the gas suffers a change in temperature. Such a change was actually demonstrated by Joule and Thomson and hence known as Joule-Thomson effect. Results of Joule-Thomson effect. All gases suffer a change in temperature after passing through the porous plug. At ordinary temperatures, all gases except hydrogen and helium show cooling effect. For example, at 0 degrees Celsius, hydrogen shows a heating of 0.04 degrees Celsius per atmospheric pressure difference. The change in temperature is directly proportional to the difference in pressure on the two sides of the porous plug. The fall in temperature per atmospheric difference of pressure decreases as the initial temperature of the gas is raised. It becomes zero at a particular temperature which is different for different gases. Above this temperature, instead of cooling, heating is observed. The particular temperature at which Joule-Thomson effect changes the sign is called the temperature of inversion. Thus, every gas below its temperature of inversion will cool on passing through porous plug. The inversion temperature of hydrogen is minus 80 degrees Celsius. If it is pre-cooled to a temperature less than minus 80 degrees Celsius and then passed through the porous plug, it suffers cooling. Referring figure 2, consider a unit mass of gas in the left compartment. Now, suppose that piston A is moved towards the porous plug. The result is that a certain mass of gas is transferred from left compartment to right compartment. Here, it is assumed that the high pressure in left compartment and low pressure on the right compartment are kept constant because the compartments are thermally insulated and the piston is moved very slowly. Let P1, V1 and T1 represent pressure, volume and temperature on high pressure side and P2, V2, T2 similar quantities on low pressure side. Let U1 and U2 be the internal energies of unit mass of the gas before and after passing through porous plug. Then work done on the gas by piston A equals to P1 V1. Work done by the gas on piston B is P2 V2. Therefore, net work done by the gas equals to P2 V2 minus P1 V1. As the system is thermally isolated, this work must have been done at expense of internal energy of the gas. Hence, P2 V2 minus P1 V1 equals to U1 minus U2. That is, U1 plus P1 V1 equals to U2 plus P2 V2 equals to constant. The quantity U plus PV is known as enthalpy. Thus, in Joule-Thomson effect, the initial and final enthalpies are equal. That is, U plus PV equals to constant. We shall discuss the behavior of gases at different temperatures. Perfect gas. In case of a perfect gas, Boyle's law is obeyed. That is, P1 V1 equals to P2 V2. Hence, U1 will be equals to U2. If K1 and ρ1 be the kinetic and potential energies of the gas on left side and K2 and ρ2 similar quantities on right hand side, then K1 plus ρ1 equals to K2 plus ρ2. We know that there is no force of attraction between the molecules of a perfect gas. Hence, ρ1 minus ρ1 equals to ρ2 equals to 0. Thus, K1 will be equals to K2. Therefore, the Joule-Thomson effect is 0 for a perfect gas. Real gases. For real gases, P1 V1 is not equals to P2 V2. So the next external work done by the gas P2 V2 minus P1 V1 will be not be equals to 0. Therefore, there are three cases to be considered depending upon the initial temperature of gas. Below the boiling temperature, experiment shows that below boiling temperature, the product PV decreases as the pressure P increases up to a moderate value. That is, P2 V2 is greater than P1 V1. U1 will be greater than U2. Thus, on passing through porous plug, the internal energy of gas will decrease and hence the temperature falls. At Boyle's temperature, the gas strictly obeys Boyle's law. That is, the product PV remains constant. Thus, P2 V2 equals to P1 V1. U2 will be equals to U1. That is, the internal energy remains unchanged or the temperature of the gas remains constant. Above Boyle's temperature, the product PV increases as the pressure increases. That is, PV is smaller at lower pressure than at higher pressure. P1 V1 will be greater than P2 V2. That is, U2 will be greater than U1. Thus, the internal energy of the gas will increase and hence its temperature will rise. Distinction between Joule expansion, adiabatic and Joule-Thomson expansion. Joule expansion. It is free expansion in which the gas expands into vacuum and hence no external work. In this expansion, internal work is done against the intermolecular attraction. Thus, cooling is produced. Generally, this effect is not observed due to large heat capacity of apparatus. Adiabatic expansion. In this expansion, the compressed gas is suddenly released to atmosphere. The gas performs external work against the pressure of the atmosphere. The process is so fast that no appreciable heat flows into the gas from the surroundings. Hence, the external work is drawn from the internal energy of the gas. Thus, gas cools. So, in an adiabatic expansion, cooling is due to external work. Next one is Joule-Thomson expansion. In this expansion, the gas under high pressure is forced to pass through porous plug to a region of lower pressure. Here, external work is done on the gas as well as by the gas. In addition to internal work, there may be a cooling effect or heating effect depending upon the initial temperature of the gas. At ordinary temperature, gases show cooling effect. Expression for Joule-Thomson cooling. Consider a thermally insulated cylinder PQ divided into two compartments by a porous plug capital G and fitted with two non-conducting pistons A and B. Suppose the piston A forces slowly 1 gram mole of a gas through the porous plug at a constant pressure P1. Now the escaping gas pushes back the piston B subjected to a smaller constant pressure P2. Let V1 and V2 be the volumes of the gas before and after passing through the porous plug. External work done on the gas by the piston is P1 V1. External work done by the gas on the piston is P2 V2. Therefore, net amount of work done by the gas is P2 V2 minus P1 V1. In addition to this, an amount of internal work is done by the gas to pull its molecules further apart against their mutual attractions. If we assume the gas to obey Van der Waals equation, the attraction between the molecules is equivalent to an internal pressure A by V square, where A is a constant and V is volume occupied by the gas. Hence, the internal work done against these forces by the mole expands from V1. Integral of V1 to V2 A by V square into dV equals to A by V1 minus A by V. Total work done W is given by W equals to P2 V2 minus P1 V1 plus A by V1 minus A by V2. According to Van der Waals equation, we have P plus A by V square into V minus B equals to RT. PV plus A by V minus PB minus AB by V square equals to RT. As A and B are small quantities, A by V square can be neglected. PV plus A by V minus PB equals to RT. PV equals to RT minus A by V plus PB. Now, P1 V1 equals to RT minus A by V1 plus P1B. P2 V2 equals to RT minus A by V square plus P2B. P2 V2 minus P1 V1 equals to A into 1 by V1 minus 1 by V2 minus B into P1 minus P2. Substituting the values, we get W equals to A into 1 by V1 minus 1 by V2 minus B, P1 minus P2 plus A by V1 minus A by V2, that is W equals to 2A by V1 minus A by V2 minus B into P1 minus P2. Since A by V1 and A by V2 are small quantities, we use the approximate relation PV equals to RT. A by V1 equals to P1A by RT and PA by V2 as P2A by RT. Therefore, W equals to 2 into P1A by RT minus P2A by RT minus B into P1 minus P2, that is 2A by RT into P1 minus P2 minus B into P1 minus P2. By taking common P1 minus P2, 2A by RT minus B. As the system is thermally insulated, this work is drawn from the internal energy of the gas, hence the gas cools. Let dT be the fall in temperature. If Cp be the specific heat at constant pressure, then the amount of heat that must be supplied to restore the original temperature will be Cp dt calories. The value in ergs will be Cp dTj. Hence, Cp dt equals to P1 minus P2 into 2A by RT minus B. dt equals to P1 minus P2 by Cp into J. 2A by RT minus 1. Now, if 2A by RT is greater than B, then dt is positive and there will be a cooling effect because dt represents fall in temperature. Second case, if 2A by RT is less than B, dt is negative, there will be heating effect. Third case, if 2A by RT equals to B, dt will be equals to 0. There will be no effect. The temperature at which Joule-Thomson effect is 0 and changes sign is known as temperature of inversion Ti. Therefore, 2A by RTI equals to B or Ti equals to 2A by RB. Next is liquefaction of helium. Helium was the last gas to be liquefied. All attempts made before 1908 to liquefy helium failed as the critical temperature of helium is minus 268 degrees Celsius. It is necessary to cool it below minus 268 degrees Celsius before it could be liquefied. Kamerlingh owns, after systematic study, succeeded in liquefying helium by Joule Thomson process in the year 1908. He pointed out that the temperature of inversion for helium is minus 240 degrees Celsius, and it is possible to cool it below this temperature by means of liquid hydrogen evaporating under reduced pressure. By applying this idea, he developed helium liquefier where helium was pre-cooled to minus 258 degrees Celsius and subjected Joule-Thomson expansion and obtained liquid helium. Kapitsa in 1934 liquefied helium by modifying Claude method. His liquefier is based on the combined action of adiabatic expansion doing external work and Joule-Thomson effect. We shall discuss both the liquefiers. Kamerlingh owns helium liquefier. Kamerlingh owns helium liquefier is as shown in figure. Pure, dry and pre-cooled helium is compressed to about 40 atmospheric pressure by compressor P. It is then divided into two parts at B. A part flows through the spiral S1 and cooled by liquid hydrogen boiling under reduced pressure. The other part flows through the spiral S2 and cooled by the outgoing helium gas, which has suffered Joule-Thomson effect expansion. Both these streams reunite at C, where again they are divided into two parts. A similar process takes place in spirals S3 and S4. So the two streams are again cooled and meet at D. Here the gas suffers Joule-Thomson expansion at nozzle N. The expanded gas cools down and rise up. So it cools the incoming gas. The process continues again and again till the temperature reaches minus 268 degrees Celsius. Now helium gas is liquefied. Kapitsa's helium air liquefier. The most important modification by Kapitsa was made in expansion engine where no lubricant is used. Actually, all the lubricants become solidified at such low temperatures. He used the compressor where the piston is loosely fitted with the cylinder with a very small clearance. When expansion takes place, a little gas escapes through the clearance. Here, the expansion is so rapid that the escaped part is inappreciable. Kapitsa's liquefier is as shown in figure. Pure and dry helium is compressed to 30 atmospheres by compressor P. Heat of compression is removed by flowing water in a jacket surrounding a portion of the tube. The gas is then pre-cooled by passing it through a bath of liquid nitrogen boiling under reduced pressure. The pre-cooled gas is divided into two parts at A in the heat exchanger. One part passes to the expansion engine E. Due to adiabatic expansion of the gas, it cools to minus 263 degrees Celsius. This cooled gas rises up in the heat exchanger and cools the second part coming towards the nozzle N. The second part is now so cooled that after the expansion at nozzle N, it is liquefied. The liquefied portion is collected in Tiwar flask and the remaining part goes back to the compressor through heat exchanger. Adiabatic demagnetization. The lowest temperature near absolute zero can be reached by boiling liquid hydrogen and helium under pressure. Kamerlingh urns attained a temperature of 0.82 Kelvin by evaporating liquid helium under a pressure of 0.013 mm of mercury. The lowest temperature 0.7 Kelvin in this way was reached by Kisam by reducing the pressure on the surface of a liquid helium to 0.0036 mm of mercury by extremely powerful pumps. The possibility of still lower temperature was explored by Debye and Guay in 1926 independently by adiabatic demagnetization of paramagnetic salts. The principle is as follows. Principle: a paramagnetic substance contains molecules which are lying in a disorderly manner. When the substance is magnetized, the molecules are set in the direction of magnetic field. Certain amount of external work is done in this process, which is added to the internal energy of the substance. Due to this fact, the temperature of the substance rises. When a paramagnetic substance already magnetized is suddenly demagnetized, it shows a slight fall in temperature. If the substance is already at a sufficient low temperature, the fall in temperature is considerable. Method: the apparatus is as shown in figure. The paramagnetic substance is suspended in a vessel A connected to a vacuum pump. The vessel A is surrounded by liquid helium at temperature 1 Kelvin placed in a Dewar flask B. This is again surrounded by another Dewar flask C containing liquid hydrogen. A strong magnetic field is applied to magnetize the paramagnetic salt. The coils M and A are used to measure the temperature by susceptibility measurements. First of all, A is filled with helium gas so that paramagnetic substance P becomes in thermal contact of liquid helium and cooled to 1 Kelvin. Now the magnetizing field is switched on. The paramagnetic salt becomes warmed, but the heat flows out through the helium gas into liquid helium. The temperature of P again falls to 1 Kelvin. After this, helium gas is now pumped out from the vessel A so that the paramagnetic substance becomes thermally insulated. The magnetic field is switched off. Due to adiabatic demagnetization of the substance, its temperature falls. The fall in temperature is detected by susceptibility measuring coils. By the above procedure, Guinea and McDougall reached a temperature of 0.25 Kelvin. In 1944, White de Haas, using double sulfate of potassium and aluminium, obtained a temperature of 0.002 Kelvin. Clerk, Steenbland and Jotter, using crystals of chromium, aluminium, alum, reached to 0.0014 Kelvin. This temperature is the lowest temperature reached so far. Theory: when a paramagnetic substance is magnetized, its molecules try to align in the direction of field and work is done. Let the paramagnetic substance is placed in the magnetic field of magnetic flux density B. Now the intensity of magnetization per gram mole I of the substance changes by dI. So the work done by the field on the substance is BdI. When the substance is demagnetized, the work done by the substance is minus BdI. From first law of thermodynamics, we have dq equals to du plus dw. That is du plus pdv minus bdi. As the demagnetization is carried at constant pressure, there is no change in volume dv and hence dv will be equals to 0. dq equals to du minus bdi. But dq equals to TdS, where ds is the change in entropy. Therefore, TdS equals to du minus bdi. The Maxwell's thermodynamic relation between entropy and pressure is expressed as dou T by dou P at S equals to dou V by dou S at P.
To obtain a similar relation from the above equation, we substitute minus b for p and I for v. We get dou t by dou b at s equals to minus dou t by dou s at b. Dou t by dou b at s equals to minus dou I by dou t at b divided by dou s by dou t at b. If m be the mass of specimen and c be its specific heat at constant field, then dou s by dou t at b equals to 1 by t into dou q by dou t, that is mcb by t. Substituting, we get dou t by dou b at s equals to minus t by mcb into dou I by dou t at b. Dou t equals to minus t by mcb into dou I by dou t at b into dou b. Therefore, the above equation gives the falling temperature of the specimen due to adiabatic demagnetization. The susceptibility xi of the substance is defined as xi equals to intensity of magnetization of specimen divided by intensity of magnetizing field, that is I by B. The susceptibility of paramagnetic substance does not depend upon the field strength but depends upon temperature. According to Curie law, the paramagnetic susceptibility xi of a substance is universally proportional to the absolute temperature T. That is, xi is directly proportional to 1 by T, where C is constant. I by B equals to C by T, or I equals to CB by T. Substituting the value of I from equation 3, we get dou T equals to minus T by mCB into dou by dou T of CB by T into dou B. Let Ti and Tf be the initial and final temperature of this specimen corresponding to the initial and final magnetic flux densities Bi and Bf. Then Tf minus Ti equals to minus T by mCb into integral of Bi to Bf dou by dou T of Cb by T into dou B. Simplifying, we get Tf minus Ti equals to C by 2mCb T into Bf square minus Bi square. That is K by 2CBT into Bf square minus Bi square, where K equals to C by M, called as Curie's constant per unit mass when field is switched off. Then Bf equals to 0, hence Tf minus Ti equals to minus K into Bi square divided by 2CBT. The negative sign indicates a fall in temperature in adiabatic demagnetization. Next is refrigeration. A machine used for producing low temperature below surrounding and maintaining an enclosure at that temperature is called as refrigerator. Actually, a refrigerator is a Carnot engine working in backward direction. In this case, certain amount of work is done on the engine which transfers heat from insulated chamber to the environment. Refrigerating machines are of two types: vapor compression machine and vapor absorption machine. Now, vapor compression machine. Frigidaire. A frigidaire maintains an adiabatic enclosure at a low temperature. The principle involved is the production of low temperature by making a liquid evaporate rapidly under reduced pressure and circulating the evaporating liquid around the enclosure. The liquid which on evaporation produces cooling is called refrigerant. Commonly used refrigerants are ammonia, sulfur dioxide, methyl chloride, freon, and so on. In large refrigerating plants, ammonia is used, while in small refrigerators, sulfur dioxide or freon is used. The required properties of a refrigerant are as follows. The refrigerant should have a low boiling point and a low freezing point. It should be vapor at normal temperature and pressure. It should be non-flammable, non-explosive, and should not have bad effect on the stored food material. It should have high thermal conductivity. The latent heat of vaporization of the refrigerant liquid must be large. When a small quantity of liquid evaporates, a large amount of heat is removed, and so the cooling will be more. The specific volume should be small in order to reduce the size of compressors. The pressure necessary to liquefy the vapor in condenser coils must not be very large. Otherwise, the apparatus will have to be very robust and heavy. The vapor compression machine is shown in figure. The refrigerant is compressed by a pump P driven by an electric motor. There are two valves V1 and V2 at the bottom of compression pump P. The valve V2 is for suction of low temperature vapor for evaporator E, and the valve V1 is for allowing the compressed vapor to let into the condenser C. When the piston of the pump P moves upwards, the pressure in the cylinder falls below the pressure in evaporator E. The valve V2 is now open while valve V1 remains closed. The low pressure vapor is sucked into cylinder. When the piston is pushed downwards, the pressure of the vapor in cylinder increases and the valve V1 opens while V2 closed. Now the vapor under high pressure enters into the condenser coil C. The condenser coil C is surrounded by enclosure in which cold water is circulating. Here the heat of compression is removed by the cold water. So the vapor under high pressure and low temperature liquefies in C. The liquid refrigerant passes through the regulator valve V into the evaporator coil. The regulator valve reduces the pressure of liquid from high value to low value. Due to low pressure, the liquid evaporates in E. We know that evaporation of liquid under reduced pressure is a cooling process. The reason is that when a substance changes from a liquid state to vapor state, it is associated with absorption of heat. If this heat is not taken from any external source, the necessary heat for phase change is taken from liquid itself. Therefore, it cools. If the evaporation is promoted by reducing the pressure on the liquid surface, the cooling is intensified. When the liquid evaporates in E, it extracts the latent heat of vaporization from surrounding the cold storage space. As more and more liquid evaporates in evaporator coil, more cooling is produced and the temperature of storage space or surrounding water is lowered. After a certain time, the temperature reaches the desired value. The above cycle is repeated again and again. Second one, vapor absorption machine. The vapor absorption machine is as shown in figure. In this machine, low pressure ammonia vapor is absorbed by water. G is a generator which contains solution of ammonia and water. This is heated by a burner. Ammonia gas escapes from water and condenses in the spiral tube of condenser C. The condenser C is cooled by running water. Now liquid ammonia flows into the spiral tube of evaporator E through valve V. The pressure inside spiral tube of E is low. The evaporator may be a chamber to be cooled, or it may be surrounded by a flowing water. When ammonia evaporates under reduced pressure, the latent heat of vaporization is taken from a surrounding chamber or from the water running in this chamber. In this way, the chamber chamber E is cooled. The evaporated ammonia now comes in chamber A when it is absorbed by water. Here, solution becomes concentrated. The solution is pumped to generator G by pump P. The cycle is for